Hi bold bakers, today we are making one of my favorite fall recipes, apple fritters. In this video you're going to learn how to do some deep frying at home, which is actually a lot easier when I share with you my tips. And you're going to learn how to make a fritter is similar to a donut, but it's not yeasted, so it's much easier. So let's get started by preparing our apples. You want to peel and core your apples, and we are going to chop them into small little pieces. Now for a recipe like this, I recommend using Granny Smith apples, and I'll tell you why. They're already naturally sweet, which is lovely, but they don't break apart when they're deep fried. They don't get really mushy, they hold their shape. So that makes it perfect for a recipe just like this. So with a nice sharp knife, what I like to do is just go around the core, make your life easier rather than trying to cut out the core, cut off the core. Well, that's a good tip actually, don't cut around the core, cut off the core. And we are going to cut these apples into chunks, small chunks, not too big, because these fritters, they fry quickly. So we want to make sure that the apples are not too big. Without trying to be too precise, I would say little cubes that are roughly, a centimeter by a centimeter or smaller. Now, this is a trick that my mom taught me. Just wet a kitchen towel, place it over the top there. That'll stop them from going brown. We're going to set them over to the side. We're going to get to them in just a minute. Okay, so let's do our batter. Fritter batter is really easy. I started making these when I was a child. In my nice big bowl here, I'm going to add in just regular, plain, all-purpose flour, nothing fancy. A little bit of cinnamon, because this is a fall recipe and apples and cinnamon are best friends. And then also a little bit of baking powder. So yes, baking powder, not a yeasted fritter donut. It makes it so much easier to use baking powder because then you don't have to let it rise and things like that, and it's going to puff up in that hot oil. Those are our dry ingredients. Now wet ingredients. Here we have the usual suspects, some eggs, some brown sugar, which is not a wet ingredient, but it's often mixed into your wet ingredients to help it dissolve. Some lovely vanilla, yummy, yummy, yummy. And then lastly, some buttermilk. Now I love this in a fritter because it tenderizes the flour, makes it really soft. If you've ever had a buttermilk donut, they are just fantastic. They're more cakey than they are yeasted. Like, it's definitely my preference. And they're just so delicious. And there's sometimes when you get a yeasted donut, there's not a whole lot to it. Then you eat it like that. With a buttermilk donut or a buttermilk fritter, there's just so much eating in it, and it's cakey and it's thick and it's yummy with these ingredients together. And make sure that brown sugar is also dissolved. If you don't have buttermilk accessible to you, can make it really easy. I have a recipe on biggerbolderbaking.com, and all it is a little bit of an acid, lemon juice or vinegar, and some milk. There's our wet ingredients. And wet into dry. Now let me tell you something, with any type of a fritter batter like this, you really want to mix it until it's just combined. Just think of it as like a pancake or a waffle batter. Actually, think about it just like that. That's exactly what it is. And just give it a quick mix. Don't go overboard. The more we mix, the more we toughen. And we want these to be lovely and soft, just like that. As you can see, there are a few lumps. In go the star of the show, our apples. I'm going to get my spatula and then just fold those in. Just like that. A quick mix. I know this looks like a lot of apples to fritter, but when this fritter cooks, it'll puff up nice and big. Beautiful. Okay, lovely, that's all we need to do. Let's not mess around anymore. Follow me over to the stovetop and we can start cooking these off. So to cook our fritters, you want a medium heavy bottom saucepan. Then pour in a few inches of oil. I like to use vegetable or canola. This is a lot of oil, but you can reuse it again later. I'm going to add on a little thermometer just to make sure we've got the right temperature for our oil. Then I'm going to turn on the heat to around medium and let it slowly come to temperature. We're looking to reach around 375 degrees Fahrenheit, 190 degrees Celsius. So the reason I love this recipe so much is because I love fall time, but also when I first came to the United States in 2008, I had my first ever apple fritter in a place called Apple Hill, which is Northern California in the Sierra Mountains. And it's this beautiful area that just, each road there's like loads of orchards on, and they sell pies and they sell donuts and fritters and apple cider, and there's farms there and animals and stuff, and it's just so wonderful. But I remember very vividly my first time having a huge freshly cooked, it was still warm apple fritter covered in this lovely glaze, and I was sold from that moment on. I just thought it was absolutely amazing, and ever since then I have loved them. So they hold a very special place in my heart and in my tummy. If you're not using a thermometer, don't worry, take a wooden spoon, put the handle in the oil carefully, and if it starts to bubble around the handle, that's when you know it's the right temperature. That's a sneaky chef's trick for you. So our oil has hit our temperature. So here I have what you call a dessert spoon. You can also use like a level 1/4 cup measure. So what you want to do is scoop around 2 tablespoons, which is roughly, around a 1/4 cup measure into your pot. And I would say don't overcrowd the pan. Just put in a few at a time. The more you put in, the cooler the oil will get. And then they'll just slow cooker, which is not what you want. Now be careful when you're doing this not to drop it in so the oil does not splash. And if you are younger, please get help doing this. It's very important. Let them sizzle away here for around 2 to 3 minutes on this side. Then when they're getting a nice golden brown, flip them over for another 2 minutes on the other side. So you can see they're lovely golden brown. Put them straight onto a cooling rack over a baking tray. Let them drip any excess oil and cool down a little bit. And then just continue making the rest of your fritters. Just some deep frying tips. If your fritter is getting brown too fast, then turn down your oil because it's too hot. If that happens, it's going to be brown on the outside and raw in the middle. And likewise, if your oil is not the right temperature, then they'll just sit and they'll actually slowly cook and soak up the oil, which is not what you want either. There's this misconception about like deep frying is a terrible way to, consume your food. Now, that's true if you were consuming a lot of it. But with deep frying, actually, if you're cooking at the right temperature, the oil will kind of encase the food and it won't soak in. It will just penetrate the outside and cook it. It's not going to leak into your food. So you want to make sure you have the right temperature so it's not going to be all oily and soaky. Look at these fritters. They're a bit knobbly looking, but that's the way the fritters are with apples in them. They get a little bit chunky looking. They're gorgeous. They're golden brown all over. They smell amazing, but we're not finished yet because we are going to transfer these guys over to my table and we're going to dip them in a lovely vanilla glaze. While your fritters are still hot, you're going to want to dip them in glaze. Here I have my Vanilla Donut Glaze, which is perfect for these fritters. Dip the whole fritter in there using forks. Dunk it, get it all covered, and then let excess glaze drip off the fritter. If you do this while they're still hot, the glaze will kind of naturally thin itself out and it will also create a lovely crisp shell. Do this with all of your fritters. I have to say, I think the glaze is my favorite part of an apple fritter. Place your fritters on a cooling rack so excess glaze can drip off. It might be a little bit messy, but man, is it delicious. Fritters, just like a donut, are best eaten a few hours after they are made, so dig in while they're still warm in the center. With your first bite, you will notice that they are crisp on the outside but soft in the middle, and at the same time packing all our favorite flavors of fall. I like to enjoy my fritters with some rich, dark coffee. I just think it's like the perfect balance. When we look inside this fritter, you'll see that lovely cakey batter that we created. If this recipe has you in the mood for donuts, then stick around and check out my no yeast donuts, my homemade Krispy Kremes, and my homemade Dunkin' Donuts. They are so delicious. I'll see you back here again, same time, same place next week.